I have Regina Barrett Foster. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And you're out in Maine, Portland,
Yeah.
Maine.
I'm in Portland, Maine. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So I saw that you do like you're an astrologer and you even went to like a university for astrology.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't even know that was a
It
thing.
is
Like
a
that's
thing.
so cool.
Yeah. So I started out very self-taught in the astrology world. I was just like consuming books, consuming a ton of stuff. And then I actually went through an apprenticeship, like a level 1 and level 2, like intuitive astrology apprenticeship. And then I was like, I still want more. So actually, I'm still in the program for Astrology University. It's a 4-year program and it's for professional certification. So yeah, it's really interesting. It feels very much like going back to college a little bit because you're dealing with like the mystical side of things, the archetypal history. You're going back and looking at all the gods and how it relates to the cosmos and all of that. So it's very detailed, deep, in level, like, in depth teaching on astrology and the archetypal structure of modern astrology specifically, I would say. But yeah,
Modern astrology versus like what the
traditional.
Mayans used to like.
Yeah, there's so many different types of astrology. There's Vedic, there's Mayan, there's traditional and Hellenistic, and yeah, it's just in medieval, it's crazy. So I'm actually going through another program on traditional astrology that starts in the fall, and it's just I know this is particularly a practice that I'll just be learning for the rest of my life, and it's great because I'll never get bored of it. There's always some other aspect of looking at the stars that I could learn from. So I'm pretty obsessed with it.
It's so fascinating, and I think that's so cool that you're learning it because I mean, back in the day, I mean, way back, right, with these ancient civilizations, they were seeking the stars.
Yeah, it was a really embodied and spiritual practice and pretty accurate. They were the wise people of their community. They were able to see trends and surmise like trends from that. And even like Egyptian astrology, like back, back in past traditional, actually, they were more fixated on the stars than the planets necessarily. Of course, they didn't name it the same stuff, but they were more fixated on like the different fixed stars that we have. So I'm also learning about the fixed stars on top of the planets as well. So it's just an interesting practice for sure.
We'll get into that later because I really want to hear about like what you offer because I know you do readings,
I
right?
do. Yeah, I do readings.
Okay.
They have different like more prolonged one-on-one offerings. And then also with the birth work that I do, I incorporate astrology in it too, because it kind of like cuts the layer of like small talk a little bit. It gets right to the depths of things, right to the depths of the person. And if I'm working with a person on something so intimate like birth, like I want to get there. I want to get to like a really great relationship with that person. And we have so many things to work on, right? Because you want to work on things before you go through the birth process, because either way it's going to come up, right?
Yes.
So that helps me like as a tool to like really figure out like their life's journey and who they are and what we may want to talk about in our like prenatals essentially.
Yeah, 100%. And I also feel like the women maybe that we're attracted because I feel like we're kind of in the same world,
Yeah.
they're into that. And I think when a woman dives deeper, has the opportunity that you're giving them to dive deeper, they're going to seek more things and then more things that can come up and then they can, work through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so
Absolutely.
important. That's so cool. That's a great offering.
It's fun. I love what I do. It's so exciting. And I also love the people I work with too. So it's fun. That's the whole point
Yeah.
of life, is to have fun and to create and to be together and be in community. So I
Hmm.
feel really cool and like blessed to be able to do that on a day to day.
Yeah. And I also saw you took Rochelle Saliga Garcia's course, Innate Postpartum. Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
cool too.
Oh my gosh, yes. It was one of the most transformative courses I've ever taken in my life. She is such beautiful and amazing teacher. And postpartum was one of the things that was really hard on me, like really hard out of all the, prenatal to like, pre-pregnancy, pregnancy, birth. Postpartums would like hit me like a ton of bricks. And going through her course, there was so much healing for myself. And it's like healing that I now can like bring to the community to put this awareness towards postpartum, because man, it is forever, and like it truly is something that we really need to be focusing on. So definitely part of my offerings as well, just because it's so important. It's so important.
That's beautiful. I was shared her reading list. I haven't taken her course yet, but the book Maternity by Laura Gutman, was that on the reading list
Yes.
that you had? Okay, I'm reading it right now and I love it so much. And even though, you know, it's simple, it's not a big book, but when she gets into and the topics covered, like how what was I reading? Well, she talks about how children are fusional beings.
Yeah, that blew my mind too.
Yeah, and how we don't see, you know, we only see the physical, but when a baby or when a child gets attached to their environment and you just take them out, they're like, what the heck? So then sometimes you see them take, you know, something that they had at a birthday party after they warmed up being there, and you're like, okay, you stole something, but it's not. They began some attachment, fusion to their environment. So now I know, like when I take him to, when we go back home from the river, we always like take a rock.
Yeah, my kids are the same way. Yeah. And just having an appreciation for that instead of being like, you know, my old programming from my Caribbean parents, like, no, those don't belong in the house. No, we're not taking that back. No, you know, but now I'm like, okay, let them take what's comfortable. Let them, like, you know, take something from an environment they connected with. So yeah, I agree.
Okay, so I want to get into your birth story. You had a home birth and then a free birth. Can you take me to like the beginning on how, even with the home birth, so you have Caribbean roots.
Yeah.
How did you get influenced and the want to have a home birth? Did your mom give birth at home? Like how did you get inspired?
My mom, I feel like this was healing for my mom on some level, like, because 2 years prior to even having having my first pregnancy, I really got into doula work. So it was great because it was like right next to my house, this like doula coalition essentially. I just was walking by one day and I was doing yoga in this building that did like different events, and they also had this yoga.
Wait, is this in Maine?
No, it's in Brooklyn. I was living in Brooklyn at the time.
Okay.
And I was just, you know, I was doing yoga and I was like, oh, what's a doula? I didn't even know what a doula was then. And, you know, started getting into this work. Essentially, it was Ancient Song Doula Collective in Brooklyn. And Chanel Portia is the one who heads it. She's amazing. And it blew my mind. I just became addicted to birth after that. And I had a cousin that was pregnant at the time. And it almost like, this cousin of mine, we like go through life.
Sorry, so yeah, hold on. So what attracted you to even the doula work?
It was literally like serendipitous. I was just in the right place at the right time, and it like activated something in me. It felt like I was coming home to something. It just felt like, oh my God, why didn't I know about this my whole life? This feels like this is something I should have been doing years ago. So that light bulb like went off for me. I started getting really into doula work. I had this like, you know, they do all kinds of work. They do hospital work. This doula collective in particular was working with, you know, BIPOC women, was working with, you know, women who really couldn't afford a doula, and going into all kinds of situations, hospital, home birth, whatever. I had a preference for home birth. So actually the first couple of births that I actually ever saw were home births. And I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. I want this specifically. I did maybe a couple of hospital births and I just was like, I'm getting vicarious trauma. Like there's a lot that I just can't vibe with. And energetically, I was like, I don't want to be in the hospital. So I knew home birth existed. And I was like watching all the videos, doing all the things years before I even got, you know, pregnant. So husband was on board. He already knew that I was in this world. Like, he already, you know, figured that that's what it was going to be. I've had him watch like The Business of Being Born and all that. So he was very much on board. It was like a seamless thing. Everything about my pregnancy with my first daughter was just very like seamless and flowy, except for the fertility journey, I will say. It took us maybe 8 months to get pregnant, which is not a long time, but truly it was a learning experience because I thought it would happen immediately. And I ended up, you know, just really getting into holistic fertility. That's how I kind of started getting into that. Basically, it was just through my first TTC journey, I guess. And so I read the book, you know, Take Charge of Your Fertility by Tony Weschler. And then I read The Garden of Your Fertility by Katie Singer, which I love that one. It's at least marrying the spiritual with the, you know, with the physical. So I really love that book. And it just changed my life. Like I just didn't realize that I wasn't tracking my periods, that I wasn't like aware of my body's cycles before all of this. And so I got really into like paying attention to my body. And my periods were so terrible before, like they were terrible. I was always writhing in pain every single month. I had clots, like it was just all these things. And I paid attention to the blood that was coming out of me every cycle. You know, I was just really into that. And I stopped taking ibuprofen or any sort of NSAIDs for my period and just kind of like sitting with the pain. So that was an interesting process. Really, really interesting. Cleaned up my diet, gave up gluten, all the things. I was doing all the things, right? And then we did get pregnant, you know, after all of that. And it was pretty cool. Like it just ended up being like this beautiful, seamless thing. And I had taken so many pregnancy tests by the time I was pregnant that I didn't take a test. So I just thought my period was really late, like really late. Because the symptoms are the same. I was like psyching myself out month after month after month, like, and getting my period every time and feeling that disappointment. So I didn't take a test until probably like my period was like 15 days late, something like that. Yeah, I got pregnant and it was beautiful. And I would say early pregnancy was really interesting. It was easy. I wouldn't want to say that I had like morning sickness at in either one of my pregnancies. I had a lot of food aversions. And that just like lasted the whole pregnancy. And I was surprised by that. So like my first pregnancy, so many food aversions that I got into like really terrible eating habits. So I would just eat like bread and pasta. Like that's all I wanted. So I hadn't had gluten before my pregnancy for like a year and went back to gluten, and it didn't seem to shift anything like while I was pregnant, but it definitely came out in postpartum. So I'll get into that. But yeah, pregnancy was really easy and seamless the first time around. I still had like my busy New York lifestyle. It's not like I changed my lifestyle, but I was pretty energetic, pretty happy, seamless, very, you know, energetic up until the end, honestly. So that pregnancy was really, really seamless. And I was just happy and bubbly the whole time is what I remember. Yeah.
And did you go to your own collective to get prenatal, or did you give yourself prenatal?
So the first time around, I was, you know, I was still that doula. So I was still like, I want a midwife. I know I want a midwife. And then I started out at an OBGYN because I didn't have a midwife yet. And I figured, whatever, we'll just get started. I started going to them at 10 weeks, which now I'm like, so unnecessary. But went to them. But every time I would go, we would like wait for 45 minutes for a 5-minute appointment. And every single time they were scanning me, and I just didn't feel good in that space. And about 20 weeks, I found a CNM, like a certified nurse midwife, because that's the only kind of midwives that were allowed in New York at the time. And I picked her because she was super spiritual. She was very much saying the right things, like, you know, birth is, you know, hands off, it's your own thing. I birthed 5 of my own children. She was amazing. I really, really liked her. And I really liked that she was hands off, even though I wasn't ready for someone to be hands off yet. I still was giving a lot of my power to her. And that's a lot of like what made my decision to free birth the second time around. So she was wonderful. I can't complain about her, but it was more me and like my understanding of power dynamics that I feel like I didn't like, basically. So she was great. She was hands off. She was very.
Can you share? You mean power dynamics during the birth, or even before birth?
Even before birth, I'm like, what do you think about this? Like deferring my power to her in a lot of different ways. And of course, she's a knowledgeable person, but she really is just there as a guide. And I think she's used to being in the midwife role. It's not like she's going to be like, don't ask me, ask yourself kind of thing. She was just like telling me the information. So I noticed that in myself, that I was very much like, she knows better. And I kind of like gave authority and like wisdom almost to her without consulting myself. And I noticed that was, you know, through in retrospect, that I don't want it to be that way. So anyway, the prenatals were great. It was fine. Switched over. We had long prenatals and group prenatals, which was really nice. I felt really comfortable with her. I had it in my head that I was going to go at like 38, 39 weeks. I don't know why, but this is like that New York, like my nervous system was like parasympathetic, go, go, go. Things got to be on my timeline kind of thing. Yeah. So she did not come at 39 weeks, and I was getting very antsy, even though it was 39 weeks. Like that's not a big deal. I was getting very antsy. and her due date was June 12th. And it was June 9th at the time. And I was like, okay, husband, we need to have like time together and intimacy because she's going to come soon. And like, blah, 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 blah. Like I was just stressing out. I had planned a whole weekend of stuff because I didn't want to think about giving birth essentially. And he was on the phone, I remember that night with his dad, and they used to have really long conversations. And I remember getting really mad because I'm like, this is supposed to be our time. And I just remember like laying in bed upset because I like wanted to have time with him. It was like almost midnight at this point. I put on Netflix. I was specifically watching Call the Midwife, I think, that show. I turned it on and I felt this warm liquid like ooze out of my body. And so I was like, what? I was like, wait a minute. I don't think that was pee. And so my water basically broke, but it was like the slow trickle, and it was a slow trickle throughout the entire labor. And so I was like, okay, water broke first. All right, there we go. What do I do? What do I do? I'm freaking out. And so I'm like, my adrenaline goes up. And of course, as a doula, I know it's like rest. You should rest at this point. So I try to rest. I tell him what's going on. He finally gets off the phone with his dad. I tell him what's going on, and he's like, I gotta go to sleep. So I was like, yeah, you definitely need to go to sleep. I'm gonna try to go to sleep too. And so I do. But then I think within like 30 minutes, I feel like period cramps, basically. And so it was nothing. It really was light period cramps. I could have just maybe ignored it, but I was so excited and I couldn't like ignore that. So I was laying down, but every 30 minutes or so, I'd get these like period cramps. And so I just get up, and then finally I couldn't sleep. Right. So I would say that I didn't sleep pretty much. So I started off the labor in a like tired zone, which is not the best because we know that birth is a marathon. So I started out in a tired zone. I would say that honestly, the contractions started picking up, or the labor waves started picking up maybe 6 hours after my water broke. But they were still pretty mild and inconsistent, right? So I called my doula in the morning. My doula is a friend from the doula collective that I worked with, and she was wonderful. She was one of the teachers, actually, so she was a little bit more advanced as a doula. And then she came over, checked in, basically saw that I was not anywhere near where I needed to be for labor. And she's like, I'll just come back. You guys need time alone, kind of thing. So we did. We went on a walk in the neighborhood. It was like 1 p.m. at this point. Just walking around, talking, just enjoying things, but I'm still leaking. So it's uncomfortable, right? I'm leaking like crazy. I never noticed like a mucus plug or anything out of this particular labor because it was all kind of mixed in with my waters. Like my waters were kind of stretchy, and like, the mucus plug was coming out in a different way. And so there was that. And like my contractions, when they did come, felt really powerful, but not consistent enough for any like true traction or movement. So around 4 is like, I feel like when it actually picked up. So we go from like midnight to like 4 p.m., same day, I guess. And 4 p.m. is when it actually picked up. And I did this thing where I don't recommend it for my clients now. I had a party birth. So
What's a party birth?
A party birth is when you invite everybody and their mama to your birth.
Okay, to the actual birth.
Yeah. So
was that a plan?
Okay. It was a plan.
Okay.
Like my sister came down. It was all people that, I do, if anyone's going to have people at their birth, I'm always like, be comfortable pooping and peeing in front of them and being completely naked and raw, And so this was my family, my really close family. So I was like totally fine with that. But I just was I was obsessed with birth, and I'm like, I know I'm gonna have this amazing home birth. Come and witness like the power, like,
the celebration.
The celebration, yeah, and like the amazingness of birth, right? And so they were curious because everybody in my family thought I was crazy for having home birth. And so my sister came. My mom lives in Florida, so she's too far away. We couldn't predict when, she had plans to like planned her flight for like much later. So it's my sister.
So can I ask, when you said they thought you were crazy for having a home birth, how did you navigate that? And then was it hard?
I've always been the black sheep in my family. So
are you the youngest? Are you younger than your sister?
Yes, I'm the youngest.
Okay.
Yeah, I am the youngest. And so they're always like, whatever, Regina. Like, they're just like, okay, we know you're going to do whatever you're going to do. And it was still not like as nutso or crazy in quotations as Freebirth, right? Because I still had a midwife there. She still had like certification and all the things, right? So it was honestly not super controversial. I didn't tell my dad at all. I know my mom was freaking out, but she does this thing where she's really good about like giving me space and freedom about my choices, and like whatever her opinions are, she kind of hides them from me because she respects my decisions. So I could tell her. And my dad, I didn't even tell. I told him afterward. So I just ignored all the questions about the hospital and all the things. So I told him afterward, because he's just like a man of his opinion, and he will say a lot of things. And I was just like, whatever, I don't need that. But everybody knew. And everyone's like, you're crazy, whatever. And so I was fine with that, because my family they might not agree with everything I do, but they're very, very supportive, like human beings. So it was not a big deal. So my sister came. I had a cousin that was actually, she's in her residency now, but at the time she was just finishing up or just starting her doctor program. I had another cousin who was a PA, so very like hospital-esque cousins coming through. And then I had my aunt, who's like a cousin because she's around the same age as my sister, and my other cousin there as well. And she was freaking out, like in her energy. She did not agree with anything I was doing. She was very open about that, but we were so close that I was like, just come, let me prove you wrong. But she was very much like, I could feel that energy of like being fearful. So I don't recommend party births, because even if you're so close, like birth is so energetic, you're so sensitive, you're so psychic at this point, you can feel everything, and any other energy is going to like disrupt that, right? So my birth was long. It was long. So I don't know. And it was inconsistent. And I had this beautiful support and like, people helping me for sure. My husband, of course, was there too, and my doula and my midwife at one point, so it was a big, like, in my Brooklyn apartment. So it was a big party in my house at the time. And, there was just moments where I remember forgetting what my contractions felt like the next day, like after I had birth my daughter. But at the time, now I can like think back to it. I remember it was all in the front. So I didn't have a posterior baby. And it was just like a wave came over me, and I was throwing up pretty early on. It wasn't like a transition throwing up. It was like my body can't handle the energy and doesn't know what to do with it, throwing up all the time.
Wait, so when you said early on, like what time? I had early on too. I didn't have transition throw up. It was like maybe 12 hours before the baby came out.
Yeah, I would say that definitely like 12, 15 hours before our baby came out, I was throwing up nonstop, couldn't keep anything down. So definitely kind of getting dehydrated, hungry, really tired. And so it was making my contractions act kind of funny. So I know at one point I was like, I got checked by my midwife. I didn't get checked very often because she knew I didn't want to do that. But you offer it, I'm going to take it when I'm so like into it, like it's been hours and hours and hours. So I took that. And she noticed that I was like at an 8 at that point. And then there was a point where I remember like sleeping between contractions, like deep sleep, wonderfully deep sleep between contractions. And I had this pushing feeling, but it wasn't pushing time. Like it wasn't fetal ejection response or anything like reflex or anything like that. It was just like every time I had a contraction, like I felt pushy, if that makes sense. But it was too early. It was way too early. So I ended up pushing way too early. And I probably pushed for 5 or 6 hours. And she was not coming out. Like she was not coming out. And I was getting really weak, to the point where I was feeling almost like no contractions. Like I was pushing against nothing at that point. And I've always tried to like figure out what happened, why it took so long, like what was going on. It was my first birth, I did try not to like overly pathologize. And my midwife was not one to be like, this happened and this happened and this happened. And I actually really appreciated that about her. But at the time I was so neurotic and it's like, I need to know what happened. So 5 hours pass, they can kind of see the head, keeps going in and out for another like while, basically. And then finally she comes out, and I think only her eyes like were coming out. Like she was just like, and then like, stuck. And that was when my midwife actually did take action. She came in.
What position were you in?
I ended up being in like I was laying down because I was too weak. And then I was like side lying kind of. Yeah. So I ended up doing that. And that was like when I did it. I remember at that point going in and out and being like, just give me a C-section. Just give me a C-section. Like, I remember hearing that and maybe even saying it, I don't know. But I remember being on the bed and everyone's gathered around with their cameras, like, and their cell phone, you know, the cell phone cameras, all the things. So that was another part of it. And it was because they wanted to obviously catch it for me because I wanted to see it, but it was so weird. I was like, wait, I'm like, what? Like, what's happening? So in a way, it's beautiful to get all that support, but at the same time, it's like also really disruptive. And I didn't know that at the time. And either way, my daughter, her name's Astrid, was not coming out. She was just like, I'd rather not. So, and then so she comes out, I guess her eyes only come through. And seems like she's just like kind of like stuck. So my own diagnosis of what happened is she was a little asynclitic, like her head was kind of tilted in a way that made it really tough for her to come out. And I've done like a lot of chiropractic work since then, and like my hips were kind of like not even, like my hip bones, pelvic area, not even, just the way that I would walk all over New York City with like really heavy purses on one side of my body, I think eventually like created that disharmony, I guess. Anyway, she was like this, like, you know, eyes only out. And I think my midwife is the only time I noticed that her calm shifted to a little bit of panic. And so she went in, she grabbed her and, you know, twisted her out of me. And I actually, you know, I felt myself tear at that point. I felt the tear go through my body. This is the only time I teared. And her like basically ripped the baby out of me. So that was honestly on the level, it was very traumatic, but it's what she felt she needed to do at that time, because I think she was a little blue when she was coming out. So, you know, I want to say it was shoulder dystocia, something like that, but that's almost hard to say because a lot of people say things are shoulder dystocia when they're not. So there's that. So I actually don't know, and no one can tell me. One, because my midwife was very laissez-faire, so she didn't really like name it as anything, which again I appreciate. But two, like nobody else around knew what that was, like knew what that meant or how to name it or anything like that. So it's always like a mystery there. But she came out, she was 8 pounds, 2 ounces, which at the time I was a very tiny person. So that was a lot. And yeah, she came out, she was beautiful, healthy, happy, and it was remarkable. I remember my cord being really short, so she could like only get to my belly almost, like kind of very short cord. And I wanted to like, I thought I wanted that cord to be like connected for a long time. My placenta hadn't birthed yet. And I was like, oh, I'm so sick of this cord. I remember thinking this, like, I'm so sick of this cord. Like, I just want to hold my baby fully. And then I actually got stronger contractions from my placenta coming out. So like, it was weird because I had no contraction, like very little mild contractions when I was trying to push my daughter out, no fetal ejection response really. And once she was out, I got these like strong placenta get out like contractions. So placenta came out pretty easily. And then she did give me, I believe she gave me Pitocin, like without me like wanting her to, for the bleeding, which was very annoying.
When they do,
I don't know.
when you get Pitocin, is it like a shot in the thigh? Like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. I don't know if she did or not. I have to actually walk that back. I'm not sure if she did or not, but yeah, she definitely pulled on my cord from my placenta for sure, got it out, and then started stitching me. So she stabbed me with something that's probably lidocaine for the stitching. So maybe I didn't get Pitocin. I don't think I did. I don't know. It's all blurry at that point and no one can tell me. But she gave me lidocaine, started stitching me, and she did basically a husband stitch, what they call a husband stitch, where it's like very tight stitching. Like you're just sealing that vagina up so you can have like a nice seal, like tight vagina again, basically the husband stitch, which is like so sexist and ridiculous. But yeah,
I never heard of that.
Yeah, it's really shitty.
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse my language. But yeah, it was way too tight. I really hated those stitches and they took a while to heal for sure. But yeah.
Wait, so when your placenta came out, was the cord still attached to Astrid?
Yeah, the cord was still attached. But I will say like probably another 15 minutes after that, I was like, cut it. Like, I'm good. So
and the cord already stopped beating by then.
By then, yeah, the cord was like white and limp. But now I'm like, oh, I should have kept it on a little bit longer. But then I was just like everything, I was exhausted. I don't feel like I got that instant rush of oxytocin. I feel like something was interrupted there. I was just really tired and like kind of out of it. So maybe, I don't know. I don't know what it was, but I didn't get that instant rush. It was like the oxytocin came in waves like 2 weeks afterward. It was really interesting. Because I remember her coming out and being like, this is my like cute, like, oh my goodness, just kind of like in a daze about it. And just excited, but also thinking like, oh wow, my child really looks like a little alien. Like I never imagined this before. This is interesting. So yeah, it was interesting. It was very interesting. Tried to breastfeed and had a lot of, I don't know, not resistance to breastfeeding. My milk came in by day 4. I remember that distinctly, but I remember it was really hard with the colostrum to like get her to latch on. Um, but she did. And like I didn't have to use any other sort of like anything else really. So it worked. I remember breastfeeding being particularly difficult for 4 weeks straight. Like just bleeding and scabbing and feeling like she's just stabbing me every time. Every time she was feeding on me and having like, issues with that. Like, and I when my milk came in, my breast went from a B cup to like a J. Like they got
Whoa.
so massive. And I would say the postpartum part, it was beautiful. I was bonding with my child, but I was very like, I was having a very hard time being in my body, like a very hard time with like the massive changes. And I didn't have that during pregnancy. Pregnancy, I loved all the changes. I loved my body growing. It all seemed natural and right. But postpartum is when I had those feelings of like, oh my gosh, I'm starting to like hate my body. And I hate to say that, but like I was like, wow, I don't like this. But I had so much milk, at least, such a blessing, honestly. But I never wanted really large boobs. So I was like, what's happening? Like these are huge. I don't know what to do. And all of my friends only went up a cup or two. I went up like 50 million cups. I don't know. I
Yeah.
went up so many cups.
Well, now
So
I'm curious. So I'm 14 months postpartum. My
mhm.
boobs have deflated. Did
Yes.
yours? Okay.
Yes, they deflated, thank God. They deflated for sure. And of course, because they stretch out so much, it was like this sad like deflation. And it was subtle. Like I breastfed both of my kids for about a year or so. And then, they gradually went down. Like I would say the big, humongous breast were maybe like the first 2 months, and then it would start calming down from there for sure. But I was like, what's happening? I don't know what to do. This is so much. But I
Yeah.
did have thankfully enough milk, and she was a big eater. So that was really helpful.
Oh,
And
great.
yeah, and she, every single time I had one boob that produced much, much more than the other. So it was just like that. And I just accepted it because it all worked out because she got enough. It's just
Yeah.
one boob was like an overproducer, and one was like, okay.
Yeah, that was me too. So 4 weeks of, you know, not having, well, having scabs and all this stuff. How did you go over the hurdle? Did you see a breastfeeding counselor or lactation consultant?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would say like day 2, day 3, I had someone come in and make a placenta smoothie for me. So she dried my placenta, made placenta pills, but before she did that, she made a placenta smoothie like that morning. So I had someone separate from my doula. Apparently, like this doula, she's a doula too, the placenta encapsulationist, but apparently had like some altercation with my actual doula. They didn't like each other. I was like, I did not know that ahead of time. It's fine. Like whatever. But yeah, she did the placenta smoothie. She was great. And then she came in because she was also a lactation consultant. So I had her come in for that. And she really helped for sure. I had my in-laws come, like, I want to say 2 days after I gave birth, which in retrospect, I probably wouldn't have done, right? I didn't realize that I would be so leaky and like so exposed and so raw. And I'm fine with my mom seeing that, but I wasn't really like there yet with my mother-in-law to like see me and all of that. And we just have different body types, different like everything. So there's just like not an understanding. And my body was like so not what I expected it to be in postpartum. It was just so like postpartum-y. Like it was a normal postpartum body, but like I felt like I had a lot of things that I was holding on to, a lot of trauma stored in, a lot of things that like I couldn't let go of. even in like within a week of postpartum. So yeah, it was just, I didn't want her there. Like, I didn't want her there at that moment. And she was there during the lactation consultant meeting, and I was like wanting her to leave without knowing how to say it, you know? So it was just uncomfortable. It was just uncomfortable. But I will say, because she had breastfed my husband and his brothers, having her there was really helpful in the end, because she was like, I know this is going to sound horrible, but the only thing that's going to help you through this pain right now is more breastfeeding. And she was exactly right. She was exactly right. I was just keep going. You just keep
So
going.
was the problem just, I mean, just new nipples? That's it. It's not
Yeah.
like the latch was shallow or anything. It was just getting used
Yeah.
to it.
It
Okay.
was, she was fine. She was doing
Mm,
what she could. And I, another friend was like also really helpful, because you hear all this stuff with lactation consulting, and like it's your posture, it's the form, it's like whatever that's causing the pain. And that's not necessarily true. It's because the baby's mouths are small and like and your boobs are new to this. And so there is going to be a degree of pain. It's not painless. Breastfeeding is natural, but it's not the most like easy thing to do. There's a learning curve. I call it a hazing process for some people.
yeah.
Um,
And I think, yeah, so it's completely normal to have sore nipples and boobs in the beginning, but not
yeah,
long term.
not long term. Exactly. I think mine was like my sister, 2 weeks, she was good. A lot of people, 2 weeks was like really when they would start feeling it. And I know my nipples do have like a bit of a flatter appearance to them. So I do think that is in part why it took so long, for sure. It's like she didn't have any mouth stuff or tongue ties or anything like that. But I do think that like my nipples were kind of flatter, and they were getting used to like being, I don't know, used for a nipple.
Yeah.
So yeah, it took longer. It definitely took longer. I would even say 4 to 6 weeks, where I like still was kind of in pain, but not as much. But 4 weeks, definitely excruciating pain.
Yeah. Thank you
So
for sharing that, because I feel like, well, one, we don't really talk about our breastfeeding journey. It's
yeah,
kind of like, is she eating? Are you getting enough milk? Like, those are the only questions. And
yes,
I like knowing the specifics, because, we need to support other women, because some women just give up. Like, oh, my
yeah,
nipples. I mean, like my cousins in Thailand, it's like my nipples are inverted, so I'm not going to breastfeed. I'm like, really? That's it? Like, you're not even
yeah.
going to go see someone?
You
And
can
so,
totally, yeah, make it work. And like,
mhm.
I had a good cousin, and she gave up too, and she wasn't producing enough. And that's like partially because of her birth experience as well, and like what happened and the different medications she was fed and all kinds of things. And she feels like, oh, her mom didn't have milk, so she's not going to have milk, kind of thing. And there's so many spiritual things going on there too, metaphysical things going on top of that, that I wanted to work through with her, but only when someone's ready, only when someone allows that, right? So,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that, yeah, so I hope whoever's listening to this, that you feel encouraged. It is an like hazing process a little bit. It is painful. There are a lot of hoops and hurdles to go through, but if you keep going, and again, this is like in a perfect world where you do feel like you have enough milk and you do feel like you can keep going, because I don't want people to be like torturing themselves either, right? But at the same time, my sheer stubbornness did help me have a successful breastfeeding relationship with my daughters.
Mhm. Yeah, and
Yeah.
seeking help. You sought help as well. And I feel like some women may not want to spend the money, but it's like,
Oh,
this
it's
is
so
so
worth it.
important.
This is so important.
It's
Yeah, it was one of
essential.
those things that I like budgeted for ahead of time, because I'm like, this is postpartum is important, birth's important, all of this, like I'm prioritizing this as an expenditure, because I know this is something that's going to improve my relationship with my kids and set me up for success. So, yeah, it's important.
That's beautiful. And so, did you have your family stay a little longer to help you cook and clean? And
So,
were they,
yes and
okay,
no.
yeah, were they staying in your apartment with you?
Yes, they stayed as long as they could, but then they like left. My sister was probably the only one that stayed, and she held her niece for the first time, and it was just a beautiful experience. The rest of them, they went home, obviously. Like all of them lived nearby. It was like a beautiful time where we all kind of lived very close to each other, except my sister lived like in Queens, a little bit further out at the time. So she stayed over. And yeah, she stayed and helped me. I will say my doula and my midwife did the majority of like the work to help clean up and stuff. I think they helped a little bit. Like they were feeding me fruit and coconut water and all the beautiful things during my birth. Even though I wasn't keeping it down, and they were helping me with everything. But yeah, It was most, I would say, like the doula and the midwife did a lot, or directed the crew, if anything. Yeah.
Okay. And so after the birth of Astrid, were you able to process all this? And how did you arrive at wanting to free birth?
So I feel like I took a while to process her birth. Like after her birth, postpartum wise, I didn't feel like I was healing fast enough. Like I had a moment where I was like, I'm not losing any weight. I'm not like, I feel very tired and fatigued. I feel off. I feel like there's something like dragging in my like heaviness in near my vagina. Like I had to go, I went to the doctor for it and they were just like, it just happens after birth. Like whatever. And I did my own research and I realized I had a prolapse, like a bladder prolapse in particular. I don't know, maybe from excessive pushing or just the way that my body was like kind of like not centered pelvic wise.
How many weeks did you go get checked, like where they said you had a prolapse?
It was like, so I had my 6 week checkup with my midwife, and she also kind of was like, yeah, like kind of like not really, talking about it or giving me more information about it. And then I went to my doctor and they were even more dismissive about it. So
What
I
did it
did.
feel like for you?
So when I was walking, I just felt like my pelvic floor was like gonna come out of me. It just felt very heavy and like it was hard to like do long walks basically. And I knew that running was out of the equation basically. And I got really sad about that because that was like my main form of exercise beforehand. So yeah, it was just really uncomfortable to move around. And I noticed like the more energy I expended or the more walking I did, that I would feel even heavier, if that makes sense. Yeah. And all of my friends, like I had two friends that were pregnant at the same time, and they were all like healing really well and losing weight with breastfeeding. I am a person who does not lose weight with breastfeeding, unfortunately. But they were like thriving, and I felt like I was not. Thriving in any sense. Like I was thriving with my relationship with my daughter and I was breastfeeding. I was so thankful for that, but I felt like in my body I was holding on to something, or holding on to a lot of stress or trauma or something. It was not coming through. But yeah, I finally did some research. In like 3 months postpartum, I went to a pelvic floor PT, and they identified also that I had like a minor, but like it was their bladder prolapse, and we did pelvic PT work. I remember going there, and the first thing they do is they actually give you a belly massage. And I started crying. Like they started rubbing my belly. I realized I hadn't touched my belly. I hadn't like processed anything. And I just obviously was moving those emotions, that trauma, whatever was stuck in there. And I just started crying. Like it was just this release. It was unbelievable. And so the pelvic floor PT helps so much. So much. I can't believe it's not something that everyone does after really, that we should all do after postpartum, because it's not like, not everybody suffers with prolapse, but incontinence or like peeing when you run after you, like there's so many things that we should be caring for ourselves, because we don't do postpartum right half the time, don't rest enough, all the things that yeah, pelvic floor PT really, really helps with. Yeah.
Oh, it's so good to know. Yeah. And I think that whole, it's like body work and like
Yes.
releasing. That's amazing to
Yeah,
hear
it
that.
was
Yeah.
so amazing, and it really helped me move through a lot of the birth, because I thought, there was parts of me that were like, I got the home birth that I wanted. I shouldn't feel this way. And I just sat with it. I finally sat with it for a while and just processed and, went through all of the different parts of my birth, because I do think overall it was beautiful, but definitely like for anyone experiencing birth for the first time, it is a huge amount of energy running through your body. For me, it translated into a trauma, especially like when the baby was like kind of ripped out of my body, which I'm not blaming anyone for. It just what happened. But yeah, it just left a mark on me in some sort of way, and I don't think that I was processing it. It was just getting stuck in my body, energy body, especially.
Well, reading maternity during birth, I'm not saying it right, but kind of like when something doesn't go the way we truly desire, we can still hold on.
Yes.
Even like the littlest thing.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what I did. And that's like, that's my tendency. Like in astrology, I'm a Taurus sun and I just this earthy sort of person. And I just like I think Tauruses in general, we just have a hard time letting go. We have a hard time letting go of things. And I was just holding on to whatever it was that I thought would have happened. I was holding on to like whatever it was that I wanted my body to be in postpartum and all of my expectations. I was like holding on to so much that it was making me a little sick, honestly. So, yeah.
Sorry, and I don't want to say littlest thing. It's not it's the littlest, it's the smallest thing, but it's big.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. I did not think of it any other way. So, yeah.
Okay, so you're processing this. Okay, and then continue. Tell me how
Yeah.
you arrived.
So it's okay. Fast forward to the future, my daughter is like 14 months, maybe like a year, and I start thinking about having another baby because I know I've wanted, so I wanted like at least 4 babies. Don't know if that's gonna happen. I have 2 right now. It's changed. The dream has changed, but but I knew that I wanted my kids, and my sister and I are a year and 10 months apart, and I wanted us to be closer together. But then I also read like Weston A. Price, some of their materials, and he talks
Yes, the
about like
child
18 months.
spacing.
Yeah, exactly. At least 18 months to 3
Okay,
years.
so when they say that, and I kept researching because I have baby fever right now too.
Yeah.
And yeah, 14 months. Okay, is it 18 months minimum after between births or between birth and pregnancy?
I think it's between births.
Okay. Okay.
That's what I
Yeah.
internalized it as, but I don't know for
Yeah.
sure. But I do think it's between births, and it
Uh-huh.
literally exactly that is when I got like pregnant
Okay.
with my second.
Yeah.
Is 18 months like postpartum, I guess.
And let's share to our audience why that's important, or
Yeah,
why,
it's really
tribes used to do it
it's
or do it.
because
Yeah.
of like your nutritional storing, like your own like ability to nourish yourself. And so when you're pregnant, there are like, the baby, there are people who have like hyperemesis and have like extreme nausea, can't eat, can't keep anything down. And it's fine because most of the time, actually, the baby is still going to get their nutrition and their resources from your bones, from your nutritional stores, different things like that. And so during pregnancy, the baby does take from you. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
you take in nutrients as well, but the baby is like benefiting from all of the years of nutrition that you have stored in
Yeah.
your body. And
So
so,
mama needs to replenish
yes,
her stores.
replenish all of that. And it takes around 18 months for that. And my body in particular, I do think, and no one's ever acknowledged this because my thyroid does weird things after I have babies. I do think that I had some form of like postpartum thyroiditis. And so that's why like the fatigue and the slowing of like the weight, like there was weight gain and like no weight loss. And it was just like hormones were all over the place, and it only starts to ease up like after about a year every single time. So there was that. But yeah, about 12 to 14 months after I have had my first, I start listening to birth stories again and getting into it. And I'm still like I was a doula, but like I had a corporate job the whole time. So I would do it on a volunteer basis, and I was still doing it on a volunteer basis. But now we have like moved. Our house is now in Maine, but we still have like I still actually go back and forth to New York for work at this point. We still have our apartment. So it's just back and forth a lot. Maine, New York, Maine, New York. I started listening to these birth stories and like painting our rooms in the house and just getting like acclimated to living up here. And I find, it's just actually scratch that. It was months before. I want to say my daughter was like 10 months. And I found this podcast by Yolande, and it was called the Bauhaus Wife Podcast. And she is such a great storyteller. She was not consistent with her podcast at the time, but like I just inhaled all that she had already there. And birth story by birth story and concept by concept, I was then becoming like, oh my gosh, she's so right. Oh my gosh, wow, I didn't even notice these things. Like I was giving my power to my midwife. I didn't even notice that I was not completely birthing in my full power. And her birth story sounded beautiful and powerful. And like her logic behind the things made a lot of sense to me, to the point where I started then researching even more. And she had one episode with Emily Zaldea as well. And I noticed that she had a podcast, which I didn't discover until months and months and months later. But I found that podcast as I'm like painting the room in the house. I'm listening to the Freebirth podcast, and these stories are unlike any stories that I've ever listened to. Like, I listened to a million birth podcasts. I would recommend them to clients. Like, I had all of them on my, like, you know, figurative Rolodex of stuff to give resources out to clients. And I've listened to so many birth stories in my life. I collect birth stories. I love birth stories. But these birth stories blew my mind. Like, it was just on another level. I was like, that's what I want. That's what my body is craving. That's what I wanted in the first place. So it just like completely changed my worldview and like what I wanted when I thought I wanted. And then we, you know, started trying again for a baby. I want to say, yeah, Astrid was like 15 months. 15 months old. And it took a lot quicker this time because I knew my body's cycles and symptoms. But I will say my body was not exactly hormonally back to where it should have been, right? So I think that I got pregnant on the first try, but then we had a wedding to go to overseas, and I had the weirdest period of my life. Like, it just came at a random time. It was maybe like 10 days late. It was like very dark blood like coming through, and I was like, I feel like this is a miscarriage. Like, I feel like this is a chemical pregnancy of some sort. I feel like this is not normal. So I grieved a little bit for that. You know, I didn't like tell anybody because I just was like, I don't know if this is what it is, but I just spent time grieving a little bit for that. And I had these amazing dreams during that time while I was bleeding, while this child was leaving me, about in particular, this child was like telling me to get clean with my diet in different ways. And it was like a very symbolic dream that I had where it was a little girl now in retrospect. And there was like a little girl and a chicken, and like the chicken was like on a farm, and she was like, either give up, you know, all meats for now, or just the best meat you can find. Like, that's the message that I got through that. And so I changed, like, once we got home, I just like went on a like clean sort of eating binge and like, you know, cleaned up my diet. Dairy's always been a funny thing for me, so I just honestly shouldn't have cheese. I shouldn't do it. But yeah, it's like one of those things, like I have a lot of food sensitivity, so I tried to just give up the things that really aggravate me. And so I did that, and like 3 months later we were pregnant with my second daughter. So that was really exciting, and I just knew right away that I was going to have a free birth. And like I said before, I was still at my corporate job, so I had a lot of like, I would spend half the month here and half the month in New York. So that was really hard on my oldest because my husband was with her through that time. At that time, he was just staying in Maine. And so throughout my pregnancy, I was like dealing with a really, really stressful job, really like stressful travel back and forth. And just like feeling like I wanted to quit my job like the whole time, and just the stress of metrics and all the things and back and forth and the travel. And like, that was my pregnancy with my second. And I hate that she has that imprint of like stressful mommy, go, go, go mommy. But that's kind of where we were at the time. And also, I had these dreams like during pregnancy of like just like my husband abandoning me. I don't know what it was, but they were very intense dreams. And so I was actually a lot clingier during this pregnancy, and he was like not receptive to it in any sense. And so that like made the abandonment feeling feel even stronger. So those feelings were going on during my pregnancy, which I found really interesting. And we were also not in agreement or not seeing on this like on the same page about free birth. He was freaking out the minute I said anything about free birth. And also, like, he's a researcher. He like went to Google free birth and saw all the negative stuff about it. Like all the like, I'm like, you're not going to find this information on Google. You're just not going to find it in that way. You're really not. So we were at like a standstill between like ideologies. He's fine with home birth, but he's like, what? How could you even think about this? Like, I can't take on that kind of responsibility.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was his, aside from that, what did he have any other fears, and how did,
No,
that was,
it was funny. Like, he gets very anxious during my pregnancies and in general. And then also like just the thought of being, he was amazing during my home birth, mind you. He was my rock, like during my home birth. And it was nice having that support. And like, we never had a question about home birth. So I didn't think that he would freak out about free birth, but he absolutely did. He lost it. He really was like trying to figure out like how he could handle that responsibility if me or the baby died. That's literally where his mind went immediately. And I said, you're not doing anything. It's all me. Like, I was like, I just need you there for like emotional support. Honestly, like you're not doing much. And I was like, this is my decision. And so it was not the healthiest way to go about an argument, but I was like, I'm doing what I'm going to do, and you can either follow suit or not. But it was just, just ideologically, we were just not on the same page, and it hurt me deeply that he didn't understand or trust me in that way. It hurt me so much. I remember that distinctly. And like, he was just upset that I wouldn't even like I made him seem like he wasn't an important part of this decision making, and I shouldn't have done that in that way. I will say it is our bodies, it is our bodies. We have already such a connection to our babies. I know that this is what my baby wanted as well. And he doesn't have that same connection, but he's still the father. And so I should have figured out a way to be a little bit more gentle and graceful with the way that I was coming about it. But I got so defensive. I had all my walls up. And so I just couldn't. I was just like, no, like I'm gonna do this. So eventually I got softer, and I was like, how about we get a midwife for the prenatals and postpartum? Will you feel better about that? I'm not having her at my birth. She will not be at my birth. And he was like, okay. And that's finally when things started opening up a little bit. So around 28 weeks, I found a midwife in Maine, and it was I wanted a Black midwife in particular. So I did find that. And she was really good. She was not hands-off like my other midwife. I felt like she was saying the right things, but I felt the energy of fear around even like the concept of me doing this on my own, because I was like, you can come if you just stay in the corner. I don't want it to be checked. I don't want the heartbeats checked at all. Like during my labor, I don't want to be interrupted in any sense. But then I retracted that because I could feel I couldn't feel like we were like breaking any barriers of intimacy in our prenatals. I think we had beautiful long prenatals where she was getting to know me, but I felt like she had a wall up. And so I wasn't necessarily getting to know her in the same intimate way. And I was just like, I don't like, she has like a nervous energy about her that's very subtle, and I could feel it. And so I was like, I don't want that. Sorry. Like, I love that she's so thorough. She's so good. Like, there's so many beautiful things about her, but I could tell that there was like, she wasn't as like open as I was to this, if that makes sense. And so in my former life, was an attorney. And so I just drew up a contract for her to make her feel better. Like, hey, be my midwife. I don't want you at my birth. If you feel like I'm going to come after you if something happens during my birth because you didn't attend, let's create this contract so that you feel okay, so that you feel better. And we did. And I was like, have your lawyer look at it, whatever you need to do. And she did. And that's how we agreed to kind of move forward. But yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting, but he felt better going to prenatals. I don't know why. It's not like he like got anything out of it, but it was fine. The pregnancy was fine. Everything was going really well. Again, it was another really nice pregnancy. I would say with both my pregnancies, for my first, I did spot like brown spotting around like 6 weeks, which I guess is a pattern for me. And then at 11 weeks, I started brown spotting with my second. So for anyone that has that, it is a normal thing, and it just kind of depends on your body. But it was brown spotting, not pink or red or anything like that. So
Wait, so you said former life you were an attorney? Is
yeah.
that like in reality? Like
In reality, I was,
okay.
yes.
Oh,
Before
okay.
all this, yeah, I am legally trained. I didn't actually practice, but I ended up, taking my corporate work and like being in a legal field. I did legal technology. Everybody in my job was also an attorney. You had to be an attorney for what I was doing. But yeah,
Interesting. And
yeah.
then I read in your bio you left that world. When did you leave that world yet? Right now in
Yes,
the
yeah,
story?
yeah.
Okay.
I left that world. Oh, no. So during this pregnancy, still in that world, still very much in that world. Still not doing what I'm like really called to do, just kind of, creating stability for my family financially in that way, but really, really hating it, because knowing how misaligned I was, it was just I was really hating it. And at the point they had done a lot of like layoffs and changes and shifts. And I was just very stressed out by my work, very stressed out for my job. And that interesting saying that people say, you birth how you live, like it was very true. I was kind of on the go all the time. And that's very much how the birth went.
Yeah.
It felt anyway, like very fast and furious. So
I with other women I've spoken to who are working during pregnancy, I don't know any woman who wants to work during pregnancy.
no.
I wish for no pregnant woman to have to work.
Exactly. It would be fantastic. I wanted to just walk in nature and just like slow down, and I couldn't. I was just constantly on the go. And the one thing I do love about pregnancy is like that your baby's so portable and you always have someone with you. And so I'd be like walking to my appointments and feel her kick and just feel like so connected and
Yeah.
like, you know, I'm feeling really bad because my other baby's at home with my husband and I'm in New York City and they're in Maine. And but I'm like, but at least I'm with you. Like I'm with you. I have one half of my family with me. That was really nice. But yeah, it's hard. I did not want to be doing all that like at all in any sense. And so I definitely think that that contributed to when she came and how she came and all the things. But yeah, we finally resolved our like standstill because I had this midwife for prenatals. Yeah, and that we just continued to move on from there. And
so at this time, are you planning to free birth in Maine?
yes,
Okay.
yeah, for sure. For sure. I knew that I was going to stop working or stop traveling at a certain point, like 35 weeks. I knew I was going to stop traveling at that point, and I did. Like it was like around November. She was due December 10th. And so around November, I stopped
Sorry,
traveling.
what brought you to Maine?
My husband's from here.
Oh, okay.
So, and he's been like catfishing me up here. No, I'm just kidding. He's been trying to get me up here for a while.
It's
And
pretty up there. I have a best friend
gorgeous.
there.
It's gorgeous. I don't know why I was so resistant. That's our dynamic. He'll like try something, I'm like, now. And then I'll try something, he'll be like, now. So we have to just go back and forth and like bend and stretch with each other. So he was trying to get me up here for years. And I was just like, no job opportunities. Like I was just in a very different mentality then. But then I knew at the time I wanted to go to midwifery school, and there's a midwifery school up here in Bridgerton. And I was like, fine, I guess I'll do that. Well, I'll quit my job. I'll go to midwifery school. He's like, yeah, and we'll build our new life. Like, this is it. And so that was enough for me to be like, yes, because after I had my first daughter, I couldn't. I hated my job so much. I hated being so separate from her. I hated having something that like didn't incorporate or care about having a family or children. I hated being in that world and having to like, you know, if she's at my home with me and I'm working at home, like having to like move her to a different room and like be like, oh, I'm sorry my child is talking. I'm sorry my child exists. Like I hated that dynamic of like pretending like I don't have a family. I didn't like that. It really, really bothered me. Yeah. So I knew I was done. I knew I was done from day one when I started my job, but like I didn't have a reason necessarily to stop. But really after my first child, I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is not feeling good.
Isn't that interesting? Your mama instincts kicked in.
Yeah.
And when we have children, I'm learning as a first-time mom, we shift priorities
Yes.
completely.
Exactly. And I just knew that I couldn't do this anymore, which is interesting because I feel like that is also breaking a lot of generational curses for me, because in my family, the women are like the breadwinners. Like we're the ones that take charge. We're the one that's like, we hold so much stuff on our backs for different things, and taking a leap to like move to Maine and like rely on my husband for a bit was like a huge unheard of thing. Like we are women that are very much living in our masculine, very much like living in our like, we have to be the ones in charge, head of family. And so it's interesting to not be that right now and to like be shifting. Because it's not like there's a point where I know that I'll be the breadwinner again, and we're gonna switch and meld and change dynamics. But right now it's kind of nice to be in softness and to receive a little bit. And that took a lot of work. Oh my God, it took so much work, I have to say. But yeah, it's nice to be in that mode right now.
Love that. Yeah. And even thinking about masculine and feminine energy, right? It's not that we have both and men have both.
Oh, everybody has both. Absolutely. But our world has like told everyone to just live in your masculine. Like everyone
Mm-hmm.
must just live in their masculine. And I did not sit in my feminine long enough. And birth is such a feminine process. Birth is just like, do not try to be strategic or like try to like, map out how your birth is going to be. You need to flow. You need to let
Yeah.
go,
There's no intellectuality in birth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I learned so much through both of my births in that regard. But back to like pregnancy, about to give birth kind of situation with my second. I want to say, yeah, stop traveling in November. So I'm home at this point. I'm like, feel like I'm nesting hardcore. I'm cleaning everything and getting ready. And I'm noticing even at like 36 weeks, I'm starting to get these like night contractions. At night, I noticed like I was getting like this feeling of like contracting. I'm like, what the hell is this? So I just was like, okay, second pregnancy, maybe it's prodromal labor or whatever. I'll just let it ride. And, I'm still working from home this whole time because my job has always been, even before a pandemic or anything like that, half remote, half in person. So, it's fine. I was doing like the last bit of admin work and different things at home. And I remember my friends coming, one of my best friend and her family coming, and we were doing all the things and chopping down trees for Christmas and like going to the outlets and going outside and doing all the things. And like, they're like, oh, what if you have the baby? Like it was like Thanksgiving time. What if you have the baby soon? What if you have it? Like, I was like, no, it's like way too early. Like, I don't go early. So, they left, and a day after they left, I started like really contracting. Like, so this is early December at this point, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm 38 weeks. Like, what the hell? Like, I think it was 38 weeks when she was actually born. It was 38 weeks and 6 days. And I was like, that's really early for me anyway.
Because the first birth, how many
It was
weeks were you?
39 weeks and 6 days. So one day before her due date. One day before her due date. So I was like thinking that this baby was going to take even longer. I don't know why. But I just was like, I was ridiculous the first time around. I'm not even going to think about anything before 40 weeks, which was a mistake because I was clearly stressed out, traveling, doing all the things during this birth. So of course she came a little bit earlier. I didn't have like a calm pregnancy necessarily. So it was a beautiful, like physically felt really good, but I would say emotionally it was kind of all over the place. And yeah, I was, traveling a lot and just moving around everywhere and very stressed. So I wasn't very like calm. I didn't have walks in nature. I had walks like through Manhattan, which was fun for me. I love Manhattan, but like no nature, no quiet time, no inwardness at all during this pregnancy. I really, really wanted the second birth to be like, soft contractions starting out, and then my water breaks later as the head's emerging. No, same thing happens. My water breaks. And I was like, damn it, I forgot to process my first birth. Like, because the same thing is happening. And now I'm going to have to process it during my labor. Great. So I knew that.
Okay, one more question before you get into your story. So did you educate yourself further now that you're having a free birth? Did you look more into things on,
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm a crazy like researcher. So some people, I think, it depends on who you are. You don't need to do this, but like some people like they just want to not research and kind of flow with it. I'm the opposite. Like I go crazy with research and I end up, I listen to all the podcasts on the Free Birth Society. I read a number of unassisted birth books, Laura Shanley in
I
particular.
love that book. I see it
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
My favorite book, because she gets into, I highlighted so much because she gets into spirituality of
Yes.
it in a sense.
Yeah.
And I love that so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that
Even
too.
the conditioning of us. There's an excerpt in there on I forgot about man and why we always need to be in control of things or something, and how we've lost touch with our true essence or something like that. But yes, great book.
Yes, exactly. It's a wonderful book. I read so many unassisted birth books. I read Orgasmic Book again, Birth Again, watched a lot of videos. I just started really getting into it. I got the complete guide to free birth from the Free Birth Society as well. Especially since I forgot at 34 weeks, my daughter, her name's Theodora, she went breech. And I'm like, damn it. So I don't know why I freaked out at that, right? Because I knew that I was going to birth her and that breech is a variation of normal for me. But in Maine, like my midwife was just going to drop me completely, which then would start up my husband's anxiety and all the things. So she was just like, oh, looks like she's breech. I don't attend breech births. And I was like, you're not attending my birth, but she would not like put her hands on it at all. Right. But she was just like, you have time, you're 34 weeks. It's not like a, big deal. You could do moxibustion, different things like that. Like, you have options, and the baby also might flip.
How did she know the baby was breached?
So I didn't do Doppler at all with her, because I knew that that's essentially ultrasound waves as well. And so she was doing the fetoscope for me and also just palpating my belly, and she knew that the baby had flipped. So she was very good at palpating my belly, and figured that out at 34 weeks. And I was going back to New York a couple of days afterward. And so I found this amazing place that took insurance, this Eastern medicine place that did a lot of acupuncture, but specifically moxibustion. And I went there, and it was so relaxing. First of all, I had like a great time there. And then I would do spinning babies. I did some inversions, and things like that. So while I was in New York, at the time we gave up the Brooklyn apartment. So now I was like in New Jersey with my sister, then commuting into New York City when I was there. But yeah, we got there. I was doing my spinning babies and inversions, the moxibustion. I did a couple of times while I was in New York. And that seemed to help. That seemed to do the trick, because I did feel her flip. I did. It was very significant. She had a lot of room in there, because I had a lot of room for my first. It was huge, and she was just not as big. And so she just had a lot of room. But they say that like the spiritual thing about breech babies, like when you're stressed in pregnancy, that they want to be closer to your heart. And so like they turn around almost. And I totally felt that with her. Like I was stressed to the max. And I know that she was just trying to comfort me in some sort of way, is what I felt anyway. That's how I internalized it. And yeah, it was really beautiful. And I like, it's unfortunate that like, if that's the case, right? If that metaphysical explanation is the case, it sucks, because mothers get even more stressed out by their providers once they're breech, right? When they shouldn't have to be at all. So she flipped by 37 weeks or so, and we were good to go. But I was calling around. I was calling other midwives to see if they would support breech. And there was one who did underground, but she never called me back. And then I just started researching breech births. I started I got this like documentary on it. I started reading up on it. I started listening to breech births on different podcasts, and just understanding. It just seems like, either being on your knees and kind of standing up, or being on hands and knees is better, and like not doing anything and just kind of letting the baby come out was like the way to do it. And I was like, okay, I feel comfortable doing this. I'm taking responsibility, and I'll do that. So I was totally planning on having a breech birth at home anyway. So it was fine.
Now you've accepted, because you've researched, that breech birth is a variation of normal, and that baby will be born how baby wants to choose a position. Okay.
Exactly. But then she flipped. So at 37 weeks, she flipped. All was good and right in the world again, right? Even though it was totally fine before. And yeah, so I was home. After 36 or so weeks. I was home. Things were like steady. Noticed these contractions coming, and then actual birth date of 38 weeks and like 6 days or so, I noticed my water breaks, and it breaks in the same way that it did with my first. And I'm like, okay, I know I haven't processed things from that, because that was disappointing for me, because I really wanted my water to wait and like break later. So I was like, okay, seems like the same thing's going on, and no contractions whatsoever for hours and hours and hours. I had no contractions. And so my midwife, of course, like has like a time clock a little bit about it. So I actually didn't tell her when my water broke. I was like, oh, it broke maybe 2 hours ago, but in reality it was like 12 hours ago. So we were communicating with her, but she knew that she wasn't coming. And so yeah, I just, I had him communicate, but then there was a point where things picked up. Like I didn't count any of that as labor, because I had some period cramps off and on, but like I knew better than to count it as labor, I guess, at this point. And then I will say so I think that was like maybe like, I think my water was broken with like not really much of anything happening for a good 5 to 6 hours at least. And And so I noticed things picking up, and my in-laws who live really close to us were nice enough to pick up our older daughter, because I felt like I would be focusing on her during this birth. And I did want to I felt very strongly about this birth that I just wanted to be alone. Like I just kept getting, not even my husband, I was just like, I just want to be alone. Just want to be alone. Like that was like the feeling I kept having. And so we had the house set up. We had like curtains over our windows because I wanted to keep it dark like all the time. And the table in the dining room was moved over. There's just open space basically. And we had a pool set up, but it wasn't like, we didn't put any water in it yet. But we had that set up because it was important to me the first time around. I did not have a pool and I wanted one. Now that we have a house, I was like, there's more space for one. He was worried about the pool like flooding and like going down to our landlord's apartment and all the things. But like I was like, now we have our own place. Like let's do the pool. So we had it downstairs versus upstairs because he had the same issue, same fears. So downstairs in the living room. So I had like the whole house, which was really nice to be able to walk through. I had my waters dripping the whole time. Again, same thing with the mucus plug, no obvious mucus plug. It was just kind of coming out with the waters. And then there was a point, where it picked up. They took my oldest, which was really kind. And we were just kind of in it. And there was a moment where I was like eating soup. I remember eating like squash soup just to make sure that I ate. And I threw it up immediately. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to throw up again. I'm going to be throwing up this whole time again. And there was just like a voice, like an inward voice in me that was like, concentrate your energy down. And so I did. I just really focused my energy downward in a productive way instead of upward, because I noticed with birth and the energy that it becomes so much for me that the only way I know how to get rid of it is to throw it up. And truly all I needed was to focus it downward. And I did. And it worked. And I stopped throwing up. It blew my mind. It blew my mind. I was like, what? And so the whole birth went very differently. It's like I stopped, I processed that, I took time. That was definitely a thing for my first birth that I didn't want to happen again, but I took time to process it because I didn't do it beforehand. And I figured out a way to stop throwing up so much, and it worked. And then there was a calling in me that I really wanted to be in our upstairs bathroom, and I wanted to be alone, and I did that. And that's when things like really, really started picking up. I felt like some people go to a beautiful spiritual place during birth, but I am so in my body. I'm so in my body. And that's not true. I definitely have other things going on. I'm definitely here, but not here, but I feel myself very grounded and very much in my body. I felt like my hips were breaking open. I felt like there was so much energy running through me. And I was like, how can I take this? Like, why did I do this? Why am I doing this? What the hell was I thinking? All the thoughts coming through my head at that point, because it just felt so powerful and strong and like coming on like crazy. Like the waves were insane at this point. I was definitely in active labor. It's probably 11 p.m. at this point. That's when it really started to pick up. And so I'm like, whoa, this is a lot. This is a lot. This is a lot. And so I'm birthing up there for maybe like an hour or two. And then I come downstairs because I was like, get the pool going. Like I need something. I need the pool. And so he starts going. And then I'm like on my hands and knees because I was reading about shoulder dystocia and all the things. And like also hands and knees just felt natural to me, but I also wanted to allow more space for the baby to come through. I forgot to mention also through this that I was going to a chiropractor from like 28 weeks of pregnancy. And they were like really, I mean, it depends on what you believe as far as like, you don't need any of this stuff, but I personally felt like I did. And I was definitely off kilter and off center. And also my nervous system, this is like a nervous system chiropractor and a family chiropractor at the same time, pregnancy. And you could see like that I was in my parasympathetic, which is like fight or flight mode all of the time. And so they were working with me to get me into sympathetic, to like get my nervous system to calm down. And so that I feel like really helped me through my pregnancy, especially since it was a very stressful time. But yeah, anyway, hips feel like they're breaking. I am like, really full on in it. He's just starting to fill up the birth pool at this point, and I'm like on my hands.
Wait, is this December?
Yes,
so
December.
It's so cold outside.
It is. It's freezing outside, and actually there's a snowstorm happening and coming through. Like a huge snowstorm either happened during or the night before, because there's snow everywhere. There's like,
and your house is very warm right now.
My house is
Okay.
very warm, thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God. It's an old house too, so it's like, the heating can be funny, but it was very warm. We had the heat hiked up. We had enough oil, which was really nice, but there was snow everywhere. It was like so snowy at this point. So either way, oh yeah, it was actively snowing because like either way, my midwife would have taken a while to come because it was just crazy outside. So yeah, it's freezing, it's snowing outside. I come downstairs, I ask him to fill up the pool. He's starting to, and then I'm like brought to my hands and knees basically, and I feel that fetal ejection reflex. Finally, I was like, yes, that's what I wanted. It's the fetal ejection reflex. And so I'm like, I think she's coming. And my husband's like, no, I don't think so. It's too soon. Like, are you sure? I was like, she's coming. And I'm like, oh my God. And of course the pool is like filled up like just a little bit, like totally not filled up. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So I try to go into the pool and like, I don't know, soak my ankles in it or something. I don't know. But I'm really just like, there was like a little pool pad before you get in the pool. So I put my knees on that and she's coming through. And he's like, I was like, I need your help. You have to grab her because I was at an awkward position where I knew I wouldn't be able to. And she's just coming out. He's like, I don't know that you're really like, he's literally not believing the words that are coming out of my mouth. And I'm like, seriously, come catch her. And he's like, okay, push. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even need to. And then she comes out, she just slips right out of me and he grabs her. And I should say we didn't know the sex of the baby. We had one ultrasound. We had two ultrasounds, which I did not want, but my husband was like, I have fibroids. I have like very small, like centimeter big fibroids. And he's like, before we go into this rebirth, I need to know that your fibroids are okay and all the things. And I was like, okay, fine. So we go, they're fine. They didn't grow. They're very tiny. And she was fine, but I didn't know she was a she. And so I, on the ultrasound, thought I saw balls. Like I was convinced I was having a boy this whole time. And I think it was because I've always had the spirit baby boy like hovering over me. And I've had a daughter. I was like, it must be the boy next. Like it has to be. But there was a part of me that kind of did feel like it was a girl. I was just resistant
Wow.
to it because I had this idea in my head that it was going to be a boy. And then I saw this ultrasound, which she never told me what it was. Clearly it was like a cord and some like air bubble. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
But I was like, I thought I saw balls on the ultrasound. But yeah, so she comes out and she is this calm, observant baby. She just comes out looking at us, looking at the
Oh.
world. And I was like, it's a girl. I remember being like, it's a girl. I'm so excited, I'm like, I did like, there's a part of me that always wanted my daughter to have a sister because I have this great relationship with my sister. And so I was happy, but I was also really shocked because I totally thought it was a boy the whole time. But she comes out just calm and her eyes, I just remember her eyes, she's looking like back and forth.
And what time is this?
Oh, this is 2:20 a.m. So 11 p.m. to 2:20 is basically what I would call my birth, like active labor. So it went from like 0 to 100 to me, what felt like to me. So 2:20, she was born. And December 2nd, after this huge snowstorm, and he does tell the midwife, he told the midwife probably like 30 minutes before she was born that I was pretty into it. Like it was going to happen pretty soon. So I think she was on her way then. And she lives maybe like 40 minutes away, but in the snowstorm, it probably took her a good, hour and a half before she got here. Which was perfect because I got my golden hour without any interruptions. Like it just was amazing. Like I don't even remember her crying once, not until she like, we went upstairs and we were like, my midwife got there and doing the various tests, but she's a very calm baby. And that's the way she is now. Like she just, in situations and groups, she'll just sit back and observe for a bit. Like it's who she is, just like calm child. Well, she's got her moments. Obviously, she's a Sagittarius fire baby, but at the same time, she very much observes. She needs to know her environment before anything, which is really cool. I don't know, it's just interesting, but it was beautiful. I was down there. I, took her in like the very barely filled pool and just looked at her for a bit.
Oh.
And then I got up and I just like had this adrenaline rush. I walked up the stairs to my bed because we had a bed, like an air mattress set up down here thinking
Wait, so she's still connected to the
she's so
and your
connected.
placenta's still inside.
My placenta's still inside. And I just like didn't want to sleep down there. I just like didn't want to sleep down here. I wanted to go upstairs and be in my own bed, and we had it prepared and everything. And so I just like walked up with all of this energy and zeal and like walked up to my bed. And apparently there was like a trail of blood my husband's like picking up behind me as I'm doing this. And so yeah, I get to my bed and I'm like, wow, this is so cool. Like I'm just in love. It was euphoria. It was like the best feeling ever. Like I just felt so good. I barely tear. It was like very hairline tears, basically, like nothing. And it was amazing. And then she came by, I had my golden hour. We tried breastfeeding, but really like just held each other and just like hung out. My placenta was still inside of me by the time my midwife came. And I don't know why. I think it just was. She was like, it's just sitting right there. Like it's right there. Like it's like basically out, but not out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like released it. And once she got there, she maybe tugged on the cord a little bit and it just came out, basically. So yeah, and my placenta was really small this time around, which was interesting. Like it was like much smaller than my first placenta. And my baby, like Theodora, was 6 pounds, 12 ounces. And yeah, I was like, wow, she's small. Like she's really tiny. And she's a little early, but I was like, wow, oh man, this baby's tiny. Like this is what I'm not used to. This is very different than my first. But yeah, everything seemed to check out. I did sense some nervousness from my midwife. There are 2 occasions where she was like, you might need to go to Maine Med, which is like the main hospital here. And I was like, what? And then she would retract her sentence because she realized that she miscalculated something, or like, oh, this sometimes happens because of this. Like the baby's heart rate sounded funny to her or something like that. But truly it was actually fine. And she actually ended up helping clean up postpartum. She did the like APGAR test, baby was fine. She just had moments where I think in her mind she had to feel good about it, but then realized like everything was fine. She made me eggs. She made me a placenta smoothie as well, which was really, really nice. And it was nice. It was relaxing. It was just a very nice, like amazing birth. However, the next day, we did like our checks and stuff. I will say my daughters are multiracial. My husband's white. So they come out, their color, like I would say Theodora came out very ghost white. And I just have so many variations of colors in my family. And then I don't know what my children are going to look like when they come out. Right. I would say both of them are pretty golden, like light skin, but like I have a golden hue to them. This like my second, she came out very pale, which is normal, fine, whatever, but like ghost white. So I'm like, is she albino? But she wasn't. And so yeah, I just watched her, and then the next day she turned so yellow, which my first had jaundice as well, but she was a bigger baby and it wasn't that much jaundice. So we just had her in the like sunlight. It wasn't a big deal. And my midwife didn't think it was a big deal either, but it was there. So, I asked my midwife to test her for jaundice. And because like it's also confusing, like maybe she's just yellow, like maybe that's just her color, whatever. But she was very yellow. So I was like, can you please test her for jaundice? And she
How do you
did.
test for jaundice? Blood test?
Blood test.
Okay.
It's a blood test. So I had her, I feel bad even saying this, but I did have her test for jaundice. And now that I know a little bit about newborn jaundice, I wouldn't do that again. I would honestly like feed her breast milk, have her near me, have her in the sunlight. Yes, it was winter, but there's still sun. And maybe have some sort of, if it's like very yellow or whatever, have some sort of light system at my house. There's only one Billy blanket in Maine.
I heard about that. We just talked about that yesterday. I'm in Wapio's course right now, and we just talked about the Billy blanket, but like you need like a prescription, or not you can't just like, get it.
Yeah, and there's only one in this entire state.
One blanket?
So, one. Yeah. What? There's only one. I don't know.
Okay, so then what happened? So then she was jaundice.
She had a lot of jaundice for her weight. Her weight's ratio to the amount of jaundice she had was very high, according to the lab records. She uses the hospital for the lab records. So she had to report it to Maine Med. And so Maine Med was like, let's get this baby into the NICU to have her under the Billy lights. Me, I'm thinking it's one night or something like that. I don't know. I don't actually know, a couple of hours. It wasn't clear. So I go from my midwife telling me like, even be careful going down the stairs to being like, you have to get to Maine Med now, so we had to like figure out what we're going to do. We just had our daughter come back, our oldest daughter come back and meet the baby. And then now we have to have our daughter go back with her grandparents. And then now we have to figure out, like, I just wasn't in a place where I felt like I could like move very quickly. Like I was like, what? I now have to figure out my car seat. Now I have to figure out like all the things to get my baby to the hospital. And the hospital's 8 minutes away, mind you. It's close, very close. But just figuring all that out, like my husband had to dig our car out of the snow. Like it was just covered and pummeled in snow, dig the driveway out of snow. And he's exhausted too at this point. So we had to figure all that out. So we told them we'd be there in an hour, but it took us 2 hours. And like my midwife kept calling. She's like, when are you guys going to go? They're really worried. They don't want to give up your room, but like they're concerned. And she told me later that she kept calling us because they were threatening to call the cops on us. And I'm like, I literally just gave birth. Like it's just going to take us time to get up and get going and to figure out this new paradigm of, beautiful home to now having to go into the hospital. So I walk in limping because I'm like, what the hell? I just gave birth. Like I'm sore. I just was not planning on going to the hospital. They are not friendly because they're really upset that we took so long. So they then take us to this room. They put her in the Billy lights. I feel really depressed and wrong that she is away from me. So I am in the same room as her. I'm sleeping on this like little couch, like chair that turns into like a couch bed thing. The first night they let us sleep in this like room that was very close to her, so that we could get a good night's sleep. But she was away from me and like in this like kind of cage of bilirubin lights. And they basically said that her bilirubin levels were so high that it was like she could die, basically. So I was like, okay, I understand. Like you're making me feel terrible. Like I get it. And I do want to argue against that logic, like completely. I really do. I do not think that that's the case. And I think it's wrong that we treat newborn jaundice the same as we treat adult jaundice. It's very different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what I learned in Complete Guide to Freebirth, having high bilirubin is common in newborns, right? Emily Saldaya says something about that.
Yeah, it's so
because common. Okay, I can't technically medically say why, like the blood volume, right? The baby doesn't have that much blood, so of course, the bilirubin's going to be high because it's concentrated.
Yeah, okay. Exactly. Yeah, so time and feeding, like they'll poop it out. But yeah, they were like, no, her size, like her weight to bilirubin ratio, she's at a very dangerous level. They made me feel like complete crap. And they were like, we need to get her in. We have to like, do all these things. So she's in this thing. The first night we have like an okay night of sleep. I'm starting to feel really sore. I'm getting after pains. I didn't have after pains the first time around. And so I'm like writhing in pain, trying to figure out this like new situation. And I see her and she's like crying multiple times through the night and I can't get to her and I'm freaking out and I'm just having like a really hard time with this whole situation. And I wasn't going to use pacifiers, but I was like, she needs something, like, please, like she needs some sort of comforting. And like, I'm right here, but I can't get to her because she's in this like strapped in thing. And then also throughout the night, these people would come in and just prick her foot for blood and not say a word to me, like not say a word. Not say hello, not tell me what you're doing to my baby, just prick my baby repeatedly. And I was just so angry. We had to complain to the staff the next day because I was like, these people doing the blood draws, they're terrible. They're not saying anything to me. And they're just taking my baby and making her cry. Like, this is not okay. And I think we were the only ones staying in the NICU because I think, people have their kids in there for a really long time, but I'm like, I'm not going home. Like this baby's new, like this. No, I'm not going home. I'm at least going to be in the same room. But I know that that's something that we're going to have to work for. Like that's a limbic imprint right there. Her being separated from me first couple of days of her life, even though I'm right there, I'm not right there. She's not on me. We're not having the skin to skin time. We had it, but like quickly got taken away because we went into the hospital. So that's something that I've been processing still. She's 3 and it's something that like I know lives there within her like muscle memory, I guess. So that was hard.
My son was sick with infant botulism when he was 4 months old. And we got hospitalized I didn't give him honey. He got it from dirt.
Oh my
And
God.
he probably just inhaled dirt because he couldn't grab or put anything in his mouth yet. We went camping and it was so
Mhm.
windy. We live around, ranches and stuff. And, these spores could be anywhere in the dirt. And we have dogs, they come in. So he was hospitalized for a week and I free birthed him and never went to the hospital. And so it felt traumatizing for me
Oh
and for
yeah.
him.
Yeah.
And when I came back, I needed to get like debriefed with our therapist. And I was
Mhm.
like, I feel like we traumatized him. Like, I don't like every time he hears loud noises, I think he thinks it's the MRI that he was in. And he said, my therapist said, in life, in our lives, we meet obstacles, right? We're gonna
Yeah.
have adversity in life.
Mhm.
And this was just something your son went through, but it doesn't have to be traumatizing.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be.
You're
And
right. You're so
so when he said that, I was like, okay, like you're right. This is just something he went through. And so I
Mhm.
just wanted to give that piece to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like so clearly, like I of course would never think or say, like it's so clear to see for somebody else, but like it's so interesting how we beat ourselves up
Yeah.
as moms. And yeah, I am taking that. I am definitely
Yeah.
taking that. Thank you.
It wasn't a fun time for either, right? Of us,
Yes. Yeah.
but which we can acknowledge.
Hmm.
But
I agree.
yeah. Yeah.
It's tough. It's tough. But so we were in the NICU, I want to say for 4.5 days. And there was no every day. I was like, how much longer? Like there was really not a lot of communication about like progress, timeline, anything, because I really just didn't want to be there anymore. I didn't want her to be away from me. They would take her out for her to breastfeed, which was nice, I guess. And so I would have moments where I got to hold her and breastfeed her, but it was still like, oh, during those 3 hours, I don't get to hold her, like in between, I don't get to hold her. And they definitely I don't do a schedule with my kids for feeding. Like they imposed that schedule on her. And so that was annoying. But I will say my milk came in and it came in fast and furious and my boobs were so hard. So it was actually nice to have a lactation consultant that I could easily call on in the hospital. So that was very helpful because I was having crazy output and it was getting stuck and it was starting, like my boobs were starting to get very, very hard. And
Did they
so yeah,
give you a pump?
he gave me a hospital grade pump, thank God.
Yeah.
And so I started pumping it out like crazy. And then which also made the milk come in more, which was annoying. But she was having issues latching from the beginning, I should say. She had a high palate, very high palate, and so her latch was just harder. And she was also 38 weeks, right? So her latch was a lot harder to kind of like get into like the groove of things. So that was hard. I ended up using a nipple shield for her for like the first 6 weeks of our breastfeeding relationship, which was really hard because you have to get them off of the nipple shield after that, because I didn't like the
Oh.
nipple shield personally, but then you have to like train them off of it as well. So I don't know that I would use it again, but it did really help. And I needed to get food in her. Otherwise, there's like that threat of formula in the hospital. And so I needed to do whatever I could to make sure that she was getting like actual like nutrients into her body. So that's why I did it basically. But pumped a lot of milk, got some advice about like, what was going on with my boobs, which was helpful. And yeah, and then we finally got to come home. We finally got to come home, which was really nice, really, really nice. And we had a friend visit right after, and I think we should have said no. And he came kind of sick, and then we got really sick. We got really, all of us, even my
Oh
like tiny
no.
baby, we all got really sick afterward, like the worst sickness we've had. It was right in that cuspy time where like it could have been COVID, it could have been whatever, but it was one of the worst sicknesses that we've had. And it was, we attributed it to being completely exhausted, coming back from the hospital, just not having a moment to like really restore ourselves. So yeah, it just was. And it was so cold. Like just like no, there was no way out. It was just there was a lot going on at that time, but finally settled in. And she's been our little amazing little girl since. So yeah.
Oh my God. Wow. So where are you now, with after both births?
Yeah.
of your daughters?
Yeah, it's funny. I do these like closing of the bone ceremonies for women, and I think I need one. I think I need one. I never got one, so I definitely want to do one because there is still parts of me that I still feel like are out there, like that need to ground back into myself, even though my daughters are 6 and 3. So there's always, I think, postpartum work, like I said, postpartum's forever. And there are times where I think that I've processed everything. And then there's times that I feel like, oh no, I need like more moments here of like letting go of some things in the past, or like appreciating some other things that came through. So it is a lifelong journey. Like I said, Rochelle Garcia Saliga's her class really taught me so much about postpartum, and how both times I kind of set myself up wrongly. Like I definitely tried to, the first time around, I tried to honor the 40 days, but I got so much pressure from, in New York City, all of us like lived very close to each other. So much pressure from my family to just like get up and like go to family's house. And like when my mom was visiting, go see all of our family in New York and like just be out and like doing all these things. So I didn't honor the 40 days then. And then I really wanted to honor the 40 days this time around and had to go to the hospital, and that got interrupted. And then like it's Christmas time. So it's like all things were happening. All these things were happening. And I don't feel like I ever got to really honor that time, that quietness, that slowing down. I do feel like I slowed down quite a bit, and I'm very good about honoring that and nourishing myself. But there are points of interruption that I wish didn't happen. Still have the thyroid issue kind of come up again. It took a while, and that's part of why I breastfeed for 1 year, because I actually start feeling a lot better after I stop breastfeeding. But I don't know, that's tragic and in of itself, I feel like. So if I ever have any more, which I do want more, but now we're at a point where we don't know if we're having more. So if I do want more, I want to have that postpartum with all the knowledge I have now. I want to have that experience where I am like really planning for it and making sure that I have like a village set up around me and I have the right support, and I'm giving myself that time and that support. I should mention the first time, both postpartums, I had extreme anxiety, and I had this thought in my head like, you can't enjoy this because you have to go back to work. Do not get used to this because you have to get back to work. And so that kind of ruined my maternity leaves a little bit. Like it really did. Yeah. So this time around, I'm like, oh, now I'm like kind of living a more autonomous, like soul-led life. It'll be really interesting to see what postpartum would look like. Yeah.
What would be one advice you would tell to a first-time mama who wants to have a home birth?
God, it's a loaded one. So, like I said before about like birth being a feminine process, to not over intellectualize when you're in the birth process, to kind of really just let it flow and trust what's coming through and let go. I was at a birth recently, and I started working with this woman a lot later in the process. And I don't think I'll do that again because there's just so much we should be unpacking beforehand. And I think like what I noticed, what was coming through intuitively during her birth, is that she was hanging on to an idea of what her birth's supposed to be like and how it's going. And it wasn't going that way. It was just kind of doing its thing in birth. And she wasn't letting go. She wasn't fully surrendering. And I'm like, please let go, just let go. And me and her husband are saying the same thing. Honestly, we were all psychically connected that way. And she's like, I am surrendering. I am letting go. And it's like, there's still another piece. There's still another piece that needs to kind of release. And so the whole process of surrender is like a really big deal during the birth. And I would say just allow yourself to let go of any sort of expectation and just flow with what's happening and the energy that's coming through you.
Good.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Oh, is there anything else you want to share?
No, I don't think so. I'm just really excited that we got to do this and we got to connect. Thank you. I don't think I've ever told my two stories and like fully like that before. So this is nice. A nice first. So I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for taking the time. And I think it's so important for other women to hear the wisdom you hold and that you experienced. So are you doing coaching online, or are you just serving women in person? Okay. Can you tell me about that?
bit of both. Yeah, so I do virtual coaching for Freebirth specifically, online. So you can find me at thecelestialwomb.love. And then I also have for people that are in southern Maine, like that area, or within an hour from Portland, I also offer in-person support as well. So just kind of depends on what what they need.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed listening to you and hearing you speak.
Oh
And
my gosh, I had such a good time. Thank you for having me on.
yeah.
It's such an honor, honestly.